Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3. Creative Assembly has given us a tentative release date for patch 2.2, which is going to have some improvements to the game, though not necessarily everything that we might want, but some improvements, of course. They've released a hotfix with hotfix 2.12, which is going to address an issue with Intel Raptor-like CPUs. Have no idea what it is about, don't have one, so I can't tell you. If anyone has one, feel free to clue me in. They also mentioned that they're aware of an intern crash issue affecting some players. Personally, I got affected by this in my Vlad von Karstein campaign. That's the reason I abandoned that campaign, because I was hitting the intern button and the game would just crash. This happened at about turn 70. Other people have it as well. Is frustrating to lose an entire campaign, and there's very little to do about it, especially when you're playing on Legendary. You don't have save files from previous turns. Maybe if you made some different decisions, I don't know. I think the issue happened in particular because of the vampiric corruption and the impact that has on performance in the game. Maybe I'm just making some guesses here. But it's interesting for me, it's only happened when the vampire counts. And I've played multiple campaigns past turn 70, and even far beyond that, and that's the only one that's happened to me, but it did happen and it was frustrating. Anyway, the important thing that they talk about is 2.2, and what they're introducing in 2.2 is numerous adjustments are being made to the number of settlement battles encountered throughout the campaign. More details in the full notes next month. As well as AI improvements, split rank queue between land and domination battles. Very welcome because, well, domination battles are very popular right now. A lot of people don't want to play land battles at the moment, I think. Or people who want to play land battles only want to play land battles. The people who want to play domination battles only want to play domination battles. And yes, Skaven Endgame Crisis. Not sure how that's going to play out, and we'll see. And more regiments of renown. Now, I do want to talk about the AI, and I do want to talk about settlement battles. The AI on the campaign map has some really baffling decision making. Like, they will abandon settlements where if they stood their ground, they might have been able to win, because taking out an enemy AI army on top of a powerful garrison can be tricky. You can do it in generally settlement battles, be it minor settlements or siege battles. Wall settlements can be tricky if you have to fight outnumbered enemy. Let's say you have only one stack, the enemy has a stack, but I've seen the AI retreat so often from them. Actually, I've seen the AI engage in what I'd call Fabian tactics on steroids, really. Because what they'll do is they'll raid certain settlements, raid areas, sack minor settlements, but they'll really avoid the big settlements, the big fortified settlements, and they'll avoid any battle that they might lose. Until they don't, oddly enough, like, it is bewildering. It feels like the AI has two hard-coded behaviors that it's trying to follow at the same time. At one point, it wants to be aggressive and it wants to attack the player, but at the same time it wants to keep its army alive. And it's like those are coming into conflict with each other, so the AI ends up making a lot of bad decisions. It attacks when it stands no chance. It withdraws when it could win. It's really bewildering, really, when you see it. Like, I've seen AI stacks that could have won against my armies just literally retreat from in front of me. And I've seen AI stacks that didn't stand a single chance. And this is on the highest difficulty, to be clear. Attack my armies and lose. So I have no idea, based on what the AI is making its decision making, or what decision making is there. So yeah, some improvements in tactics would be very welcome. But let's talk a bit about settlement battles, be it minor settlement battles or sieges. And there's a lot of issues with that. There's issues with the way the mechanics of sieges work. I've said this before in another video, and I'm going to say it again. If you are the defender in a siege battle or minor settlement battle, the vast majority of times you're going to be at a significant disadvantage. Unless you can make the wall towers work in your favor, you're going to be at significant disadvantage. If you're fighting on a street level, as a defender, you're going to get crushed. Why is that? Well, because it's very hard as a defender, especially with ranged units, to really take advantage of them. The vast majority of settlement types, unless we're talking about something like the Wood Elves or the Empire, it's very difficult to get your ranged units together to concentrate fire, to get the concentration of force necessary to defeat an enemy. You can do it, but most of the time, like if you're facing a situation where you've got an army in a settlement and an AI army is heading for that settlement, the vast majority of times I found it much better to actually fight outside the settlement. Of course, if the AI attacks a settlement that only has a garrison, there are certain things you can do, and even with an army, if you have a proper army, you can take advantage of certain things. But yeah, settlements, the layout is not great, and there's a lot of pathfinding issues, especially with the barricades. The barricades and the towers you can build, are not really a problem to deal with. Like, the towers die very easily to ranged units or flying units. The barricades are not that hard to take down, or wouldn't. But they are absolutely a problem if you're, let's say, oh, I send a melee unit to take down a barricade, right? They'll have no issues. But then what happens most of the time is the AI will go through the barricade because they can, which honestly I think that you shouldn't be able to go through your own barricades. That people shouldn't just be able to magically move through barricades. I don't think that is an issue. But AI units will kind of go for the barricades, but not completely. So if you give an order to attack on a unit, like kind of in the middle in a barricade, they'll generally start moving around the barricade, which is not ideal. And because the unit is in your way, you can't attack the barricade either. This is what makes sieges so frustrating. The pathfinding is absolutely awful currently with barricades. I've found much fun just removing the towers and barricades. The towers are pointless anyway. The line of sight issues that they have really nerfs their potential. And unless we're talking about some really powerful towers like tier 3 towers or demonic towers, they generally won't do that much damage either. Barricades frustrate you and frustrate the AI. The AI has plenty of issues dealing with its own barricades or the barricades you put in its path. It used to be, and I remember videos from Legend of Total War saying this, I'm not sure if this is the case, but it used to be that if you put barricades before a battle started, the AI will just ignore them. Like, the AI behavior in street battles has always been questionable in Total War, or in narrow points has always been questionable. It was in the past. I'd say Creative Assembly made it far worse in Warhammer 3 because of the barricades they can build. The towers, you know, whatever. If the line sight issues could be fixed, that would be fine. Though I'm not sure I like the tower defense game, but the barricade system is just completely broken. Now, some people will come in and say, oh, just you find sieges too hard, to which I reply, no, they're pathetically easy if you know what you're doing. I actually find them much harder to defend. I find it extremely easy to attack, even if I'm at a significant disadvantage. I vastly prefer it when a powerful an army is in a settlement, be it walled or without walls, especially without walls, of course. But even if it's with walls, I vastly prefer to attack an enemy doomstack if they're in a settlement than if they're without, because the AI decision-making is just broken. When the AI is attacking a settlement, a minor settlement, what they'll generally do, and this is where you can take some advantage, you'll still have problems because you can't concentrate your force properly, but what they'll generally do is they'll take their entire army and split it into, let's say, 3 attack sites. Now, this is not necessarily a bad idea, except that as a player, you know that they're doing it, you can see it happening. So what you do is you mass all your units on one entrance, since you only need to hold one control point, really, in a minor settlement, and a specific control point in a walled settlement. You mass all your units at one entrance. If you have the power for it, you swarm down one entrance, either where their lord is to take them out, or if the lord is too powerful on an easier side. And even if you're losing, your goal is to do as much damage as possible. Concentration of force, been a thing in military history for a very long time. It's one of the things that Napoleon was famous for in the Italian campaign in particular, because what he would do is he would mass a lot of units together on one side of Italy, let's say, and he would leave other sectors undefended, and he would overwhelm the enemy on a local level. And that's something you can do very well, because the AI split its forces, it doesn't have concentration of force, it doesn't have all its units together, so its range power, its melee power, its caster power, it's all going to be far less on certain sectors of the battle. And you can either cut them to shreds or do significantly more damage than they otherwise would. So yeah, the AI... now, I'm not saying the AI is bad in doing this, because if they all blobbed up at a certain entrance, you could take advantage of that as well. Like leaving a token force on that entrance and moving flankers on another side, wait for the AI to blob up, flank them, if you have the force to do it. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to engage in tactics, but I think the AI decision making is pretty bad. Though they actually handle themselves better on the attack than on the defense. It's really on the defense that things get really bad, because at least on the attack, they do have a plan. It's not the best plan and leaves them vulnerable to certain tactics, but at least there is a plan. They struggle sometimes to take the points, the capture points, but for the most part, I think the AI handles itself pretty well on the attack. The settlement terrain is horrible. The barricades are horrible, but the AI, I think, is in a decent enough state when it comes to attacking. However, on the defense, holy crap. I think the issue on the defense is that the AI has 3 things it's trying to do at the same time. So what are those things? Well, one, it's trying to defend pretty much every entrance, which is not a great idea to do, even if they outnumber you, and generally you will fight a lot of battles outnumbered on a higher difficulty, let alone if you outnumber them. Why is this a problem? Well, it's not concentrating its force against you, and you as the player. Well, why would you attack multiple entrances? Like, why would you spread your force thin to attack 3-4 entrances when you can just attack 1 or 2? With the second generally being a distraction to draw away enemy forces from the main entrance which you're trying to breach. Right? Why would you do that? But here's the problem with that. So it's spreading its forces to cover multiple entrances, so it's not concentrating its forces properly on those entrances. But then the AI is obsessed with not giving an inch of territory to you, so they'll try and defend every choke point. It's not necessarily a bad idea, but they'll try and defend every choke point. Like, if you've got ranged units just outside those choke points, yeah, we'll just literally sit there and take fire and get wiped out. I've done this especially well as Kislev. Like when I was playing Catherine, I made a guide as Catherine. One of the reasons I was able to make it work was literally just park my Kossars just outside the boundary of the settlement, and just snipe the Norskins to pieces. Norskins that would have wiped me out had they actually marched out in force. Like, that's, by the way, one of the behaviors that the AI should engage in, but instead they just turtle back. The problem is they're not turtling in a smart way. They'll not just fall back inside to deeper in, where to advance you would have to go for barricades and towers and all that and be vulnerable. No, instead they'll try and do that. They'll try and engage in that kind of behavior to protect their units from range fire, but at the same time, if you advance inside the minor settlement territory or the walled city, they'll rush to stop you. It doesn't matter how many units, they'll try and Zerg rush you, actually, which you can take advantage of. How do you take advantage of it? Well, just park a lot of range units right outside the boundary, send a hero to soak the damage, and use your range, and the AI will smash their blob against you, and you can use your hero to just keep them occupied. They'll take significantly less damage, and your ranged units and artillery will start tearing them to shreds. Same with spells, by the way. Very easy, extremely easy, always works very well. Or you can just rush your units through a single entrance and tear the AI to shreds if you have that capability, as I'm doing here. Because the AI is not sending everything. Like, it will send enough to make a blob and take significant damage, but it's not going to concentrate all its units. So you're always going to have local superiority, which means, yeah, you'll end up winning, especially with the range stack. Unless you have gunpowder units, which handle extremely poorly in settlement battles. So I think the AI needs some decision-making changes, really. I think what it's doing right now, it wants to keep every control point under its control. It wants to prevent the player from gaining a foothold, but at the same time, it's spreading its units in a pretty bad way, not achieving any superiority, and it's so vulnerable to so many tactics. Like, people have won very difficult sieges by just distracting the AI with certain units at one entrance and then moving 1 or 2 units with stock past the walls to take the major control point, and the AI doesn't react to that very well. It's just really baffling behavior because the AI is reacting to what they can see, right? It can't see the stock units as long as you don't engage in a fight with them, and as long as they're not too close to enemy units. It's like, get past the walls, get past the towers, no problem. I think if stock units could be seen by towers, or if they could be seen if they get too close to the walls, that would be fine. But yeah, you use a sneaky army of assassins to get past the walls, take the control points, or you could just deploy a couple of units that can be seen. Like if you're playing Snitch, really, especially, what you do is you deploy your visible units at one entrance. The AI will see that. You smash the gate, you send Snitch, he'll survive, he can take a lot of damage. The AI will blob up, then you send 20, or let's say 10, 20, however many units with stock past the walls, getting the settlement, and while the fight at one gate is happening, you just flank them and tear them to shreds. By the way, this also works with greenskins, like with nasty skulkers. That's what makes them so powerful, because they have this tactic. Or you could just capture a control point while distracting the enemy at an entrance, and not have to do any fighting whatsoever. Very difficult sieges being won without a single fight. Gunpowder units being broken. Yeah, they would generally do a lot better if it literally rushed all its units out and left some units to hold the control point. That would actually make things a lot more difficult, because you only need to hold one control point, but AI tries to do a lot of things at the same time. This, by the way, happens in battles, in open field battles, but generally the AI will try and march against you until their behavior breaks, and for whatever reason they decide to blob up on a hero or two heroes and they get shredded by artillery as they've blobbed up. I have no idea. It's baffling behavior. I was playing a campaign as Rapans. I made a guide as Rapans. I literally, in the very first battle, which can be tricky, I literally just sent Rapans into the entire enemy army. They blobbed up all on her. She took a lot of damage, but I then used my trebuchets to tear that enemy army to shreds. Took minimal casualties in return as well. Just some HP on Rapans, which is far more easy to deal with than replenishing your units. So that this kind of behavior needs to change. And the AI decision making needs to change, and I think the pathfinding needs to be improved. And yes, I think Creative Assembly did a really bad job with the way they handled barricades, because they create so many pathfinding problems. I think the barricade situation would be vastly improved if units who own the barricades couldn't move through the things, because yeah, it breaks the game behavior, not even the AI behavior, just with unit pathfinding, it breaks apart when that happens. I don't know why they decided to introduce towers and barricades in Warhammer 3. I think a lot of us would have been happy with the terrain type. And to be clear, some siege battles can be a lot more fun if you just disable a tower of barricades, or use a mod that a lot of people are using, which only allows you to build at the start of a battle, as opposed to just rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding again and again and again. Anyway, that's all I had to say. We'll see what Creative Assembly does with 2.2. Hopefully they do bring some much needed improvements, though there are currently mods that will improve that. As for the AI decision making, yeah, that does certainly need some work. And we'll see how the AI will handle with the improvements that Creative Assembly will bring. Will they scale better with difficulty? Well, I guess we'll see what that means. I hope that when they say scale better with difficulty settings, that they're not going to replicate Warhammer 2. Because in Warhammer 2, the early game was excruciatingly painful, and the mid-late game was significantly easier, unless we're talking about the Order Tide. In Warhammer 3, that's still the case. What I think really needs to happen when it comes to difficulty scaling is that AI should start weaker and get more bonuses over time. Gradually get bonuses, not just like have significant bonuses of thousands and thousands of gold and significant upkeep and growth benefits from the very start. I think that just creates an inverse difficulty curve and pushes people towards cheese and bullshit tactics. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.